We all have verbal tics. I say and ah a lot. Maybe you say like or right or okay. They're these little words we use to fill the space when our brain is trying to catch up to what we're saying. But what would you do if you found out someone used a single word hundreds of times in a given interview? That's what I discovered when I watched this one particular podcast. I was listening to an amazing 5-hour long podcast on the Lex Fridman show, number 459, with Dylan Patel and Nathan Lambert, no relation. And I noticed that Dylan said the word right a lot. It really struck me at how often he said it. My first pass looking at the transcript suggested he said it hundreds of times. But to be sure, I used an AI coding app to design a sophisticated analytical system to find every verifiable time that he said the word right. And then I graphed and charted the results. And I actually created a video montage of all the times that he said right as well. What this process reveals is that how we speak and think and handle complex information is really just amazing. And the AI tools that we now have at our disposal to analyze this kind of discourse are equally amazing. So I hope you'll stay to the end to see exactly how often Dylan said the word right. Hi, everybody. I'm Bruce Lambert from How Communication Works. This is a channel where I teach you about communication skills so you can improve your relationships, succeed at work, and be more confident. So let's get into the analysis. So I was listening to the Lex Fridman podcast. This is a podcast that covers AI a lot, as well as a variety of other topics. And it was one of those super long modern podcasts. It was 5 hours long. And it took me a couple days walking around my neighborhood to listen to the whole thing. This was podcast number 459 with Dylan Patel of the Semi-Analysis blog and Nathan Lambert, who's also another AI expert. And no relation to me. Same last name, but no relation to me. And as I was listening to it, first of all, I was fascinated. It's an excellent podcast episode if you're interested in AI. It really covers a lot of information, and I was completely intrigued, enough to watch it for 5 hours. But I noticed, as someone who studies communication, that Dylan Patel used the word right a lot, much more than average. It was a very, very frequent verbal tic that he relied on. And I want to make it very clear, this isn't some way to roast Dylan Patel. I think the guy's brilliant. And he's doing very well for himself. He's created and founded this company, Semi-Analysis, which as far as I can tell is the world's leading source of analytics for the semiconductor industry. So he's doing just fine. I just noticed this particular verbal tic that he has, and I wanted to understand it more deeply. But you could analyze my videos and find that I have verbal tics, although I edit a lot of them out. I say a lot. And we all have these verbal tics. So I'm not better than him. I just noticed this and used the AI tools to analyze it. When I got a transcript, I first just went to the Lex Fridman show website and downloaded the transcript. I just cut and pasted the whole transcript and just began to sort of count up how many times he might say the word right. And it was hundreds of times. I thought my initial pass was that he might have said it, 700 times at least in the podcast. But actually the first transcript I got from the Lex Fridman show had obviously been edited by a human being or by an AI that edited out all these discourse markers, all these verbal tics like right, because right was missing a lot. I used a different kind of transcriber, Mac Whisper, to transcribe it verbatim, and I found all these instances of the word right. So I'm going to get into that in a minute, but I just want to show that the transcripts that appear on the websites of these podcasts are often not verbatim transcripts. Verbatim means exact, precise record of what was said, like in a court transcript. They edit out a lot of the disfluencies and repetitions and discourse markers like the word right. So the transcript on Lex Fridman's website was not completely accurate, and I couldn't use it for my analysis, and this led to a ton more work. I eventually realized I was going to have to build my own kind of analytical system to do this, and I could only do this because of AI coding tools like Cursor. Cursor is an interactive development environment, AI coding app that allows you to just use natural language prompts like you're using ChatGPT or something or Claude, and it will write the code for you. Now, I'm someone who's written a lot of computer code in my life. I started writing computer code in the 1980s, but I'm not anywhere close to a professional software developer, and I needed the AI assistance to write all this code in Python, which is what I did. So my challenge was to write this sophisticated system to try to find every instance of the word right, and then chart it over time, compare it to how many times the other speaker said it, and so on. And there were a lot of challenges, which I'm going to talk about, and then we'll show you the results. By the way, if you like my style of teaching, I'm developing a course on listening called The Listening Leap. And there's a link in the end screen and the description and the pinned comment to download a 10-page PDF listening guide and learn more about this upcoming course. So I've already said, Dylan's this incredibly smart guy. I'm not trying to roast him. I'm just using it as an example. I could have probably gone through a lot of other podcasts and find other people using different discourse markers like okay or or like or there's lots of common discourse markers. But I wanted to show how these AI tools could be used to do discourse analysis. Discourse analysis is a kind of science that we do in communication where we record either on video or audio the actual talk between human beings, and then we carefully analyze, especially sequentially and other features of the actual talk, and we call that talk discourse. So I wanted to show how AI tools could be used to do modern discourse analysis. And that's partly what this video illustrates. So what are discourse markers? Discourse markers are the words, sort of non-content words that hold together our conversations. We use them often to fill space when we're thinking. We use them sometimes to signal emphasis or to try to get agreement, or sometimes just to fill dead air while we're thinking, or to hold the floor to signal to other people, I'm not done speaking yet, I want to continue to hold the floor. Discourse markers have multiple different functions, and those are some of them. Things like so, well, like, and right are common discourse markers, and the one we're going to investigate in this video is the discourse marker right. People started using it a lot sometime in the last 5 years where people said, I know right, but Dylan tends to use it just right at the end of sentences. It doesn't add much literal meaning. These discourse markers aren't there to convey a bunch of information. They sort of convey functional information, not kind of contentful information, but they're critical for managing the conversation flow. And I didn't attempt really in a deep way to understand exactly what the precise function was for Dylan of saying this word so much. I think at this point it's just a verbal tic, and there's no explicit intention behind all the uses of the word right. And I wouldn't be surprised if he ever sees this video. If you do, Dylan, really admire you. If he ever sees this, he might try to use it less. In fact, one of the ways I recommend using these filler words less is by recording yourself and identifying which filler words you tend to use a lot so that you can use them less often, because these kinds of disfluencies or frequent use of filler words can detract from our credibility if we use them too often. There's actually a literature in discourse analysis about the use of the word right. It's often used to sort of check people's understanding. It's also used to try to kind of gain their assent or even to assert that they agree with you. I sometimes get annoyed by the use of the word right because people will say something that I don't agree with, and then they'll say right. And if I'm listening to a podcast, I'm thinking, no, not right. Most of the time, what Dylan said, he knew this information much better than I did. I wasn't in a position to correct him. But I don't like the use of the word right sometimes because it sort of asserts agreement between the speaker and the hearer, even when there isn't any. And sometimes it checks for agreement or asks for agreement. But the function can be complicated and it's not always even clear. There are other kinds of discourse examples. So you say, so, well, these are the other common kinds of discourse markers. So what did I do? It was complicated in the beginning because I needed to begin with a transcript. As I said, I went to the Lex Fridman Show website where they publish a transcript of every podcast. And it's labeled by speaker. So it's Lex talking and Nathan talking and then Dylan talking. So I copied that entire transcript and I pasted it into a text document. And that was the first thing I analyzed. I wrote some Python code to analyze how frequently each speaker said the word right. And then I noticed there was very few instances of the word right. And I knew that Dylan had said it many, many, many times over the course of 5 hours, but it wasn't there in the transcript. So I immediately realized, oh, this is an edited transcript. They've edited out the disfluencies. They've edited out the discourse markers, which is totally fine for the purpose of the website. Nobody wants to read all those disfluencies. It's edited for the purpose of brevity and clarity. But for my discourse analytic purposes, I want a verbatim transcript. So the next thing that I did was I used Mac Whisper. That's just an app you can get for the Mac. It's like $25 or something like that. Well worth it. Highly recommend that you get it if you ever need to do transcription. And I downloaded a recording of the podcast, and then Mac Whisper transcribed the entire thing. And Mac Whisper gives you a verbatim transcript, meaning Mac Whisper transcribes every word that is spoken, including the disfluencies and including the discourse markers like right. However, the version of Mac Whisper I was using at the time, it had all the instances of the word right, but it didn't segment the talk by speaker. That's called diarization. It says, here's Lex talking, and then here's Nathan talking, and then here's Dylan talking. So every bit of speech is labeled by the speaker that uttered that particular message. But Mac Whisper did not do diarization, so I was stuck. And for days, really a week or more, I tried to automate the process of diarization, where I compared the labeled transcript from the Lex Fridman website to the Mac Whisper transcript, and I tried to align it, with a computer program. And I did not succeed, even though I spent several days frustratingly trying to get AI to help me do this kind of automated alignment and speaker labeling. But as time went by, the AIs got better, and there was an AI from 11 Labs, which is another kind of speech analysis AI, that did diarization. So I signed up for a membership for 11 Labs, and I transcribed the recording again, this time with diarization. So 11 Labs gave me a nearly verbatim transcript and diarization. So then I finally had what I needed to understand who said what, and then I could count how many times Dylan said the word right. So I generated this word-for-word transcript, and there were like more than 62,000 words, all with timestamps. So it told me exactly who said what at what time, and that was critical for my analysis. And I wrote this custom Python code to do all the discourse analysis I wanted, to count the number of times everybody said right, to graph them over time, to eliminate certain uses of the word right that were not discourse markers. So if you said right now or something like that, I would have eliminated that. And I generated a bunch of graphs and plots, but I wanted to see a montage of all the times that Dylan said right, so I could illustrate it for you briefly, and then also see for myself what was the context of his use of this discourse marker. So I was able to create an XML file, which gave me the timestamp of every segment. I think I used 4 seconds prior to the use of the word right for every usage of it. And you could output that in a particular format in XML. You can input that to Final Cut Pro, and it will generate the segments for you. And it produced this montage for me. And it also produced the montage where it counts the number of times he said right and a timer at the top. So I'm going to show you that eventually. I'm not going to tell you yet how many times he said it, but I'm going to show you at least a little excerpt of the video so you can see what the montage looked like. I'm not going to show you every instance because it would take like 20 minutes to show you every instance. So here's the big reveal. Dylan, in 5 hours, said the word right 944 times. And I filtered out phrases like all right or right now, and there were 944 verifiable instances that he used as discourse markers. That was one use of the word right for every 35 words he spoke. This is an extraordinarily high rate of the use of discourse markers, I think. And I'll say one thing. I don't think that my code is perfect. I'm happy to let other people analyze the transcript and see if they find results different from mine. But I did my best to verify it multiple times. So I'm pretty confident that I found what I found. And I have this video montage that shows all the instances of his use of the word right. So here's the actual output. This is a graph of the total uses of the word right by speaker. And there were 3 speakers in this interview. There's Lex Friedman, the interviewer, and then 2 people being interviewed, Nathan Lambert and Dylan Patel. So Lex said right 23 times, Nathan said right 32 times, and Dylan said right 944 times. So you can imagine that when I listened to the podcast, it was striking. It wasn't subtle how much Dylan said the word right. It was very, very obvious that he had a very strong, frequent verbal tic in the use of the word right. This is a different graph. This shows a dot plot over time. So the horizontal axis shows Lex Friedman on the top, Nathan Lambert in the middle, and Dylan at the bottom. And there's a dot for every time they said the word right. And the horizontal axis is time. So you can just see that Dylan just said it all the time. First of all, Dylan did a lot of the talking. So he did more talking than Nathan did. I'm not going to show you the total number of words that each of them spoke, but Dylan spoke more than Nathan or Lex. But his speech was peppered with uses of the word right. And this visually describes the big gaps you see horizontally when Dylan wasn't speaking. This is yet another visualization of the same thing. Here, I took the entire 5-hour transcript and I separated it into 5-minute segments. And I just counted how many times did each speaker say the word right in each 5-minute window. So this graphs the number of times. In the blue, the obvious one is Dylan saying right a whole heck of a lot of times. So sometimes he would say the word right 35 or 40 times in a 5-minute stretch. And other times it would be down around, 15 or 20 times. But across the board, you can say he says the word right far more frequently than either Lex or Nathan did. We're going to cut in a video montage of Dylan saying the word right. And the video contains a timer at the top and a counter at the bottom. And in this particular video, I don't know how many we're going to show you. We'll show you maybe 20 or 30 seconds of it so you get the idea. But I have a version of it that goes the whole 5 hours, and it's a montage of all 900 times. I think this particular video montage has like 190 instances of it, but it's shorter than the entire montage I created for the whole 5-hour podcast. And this was a little buggy getting this to work, but this version works, and we'll show you a little segment of it.
Open, right? Think, you generate, right? now actually work, right, is like research relations, right? Like you have your Jupiter small scale, right? And they have been military, right? Especially with drones, right? Like it's like innovating, right? Like you wouldn't versus left, right?
Okay, we're back. And you see what I mean about how Dylan uses the word right and in what context he uses the word. It's almost always after he's made a technical point and he's trying to confirm understanding on the part of the hearer or ask for confirmation or some sort of assent that what he said was correct or understandable or clear. That seems to me to be the function of his use of the word right. Other times it's simply a verbal tic. It just comes out the way I say when I'm thinking. It's just a habit for Dylan, I think. And it's a habit he could easily change if he just watched videotapes of himself more frequently and made a conscious effort to say that word less frequently. What I did notice is that the usage peaked during the times that he was doing very technical conversation, because I think he's trying to use it to encourage clarification or ask the audience or the hearer if they're understanding. It's mostly subconscious, as I said. I don't think he's really intentionally doing it. He may not be aware that he's doing it, although he does it so frequently, he may have heard from others that he has this verbal tic. And nearly 3% of Dylan's entire vocabulary in this conversation, of all the words he spoke, were the word right. So this is a fundamental way of the way he structures technical information. And I just want to say again, first of all, this guy's incredibly brilliant. He knows more about semiconductors than almost anybody else in the world, at least in terms of the market and the analytics for how semiconductors are being manufactured, sold, and deployed around the world for AI. And I also want to say that he's not the only one who uses discourse markers, and he's not the only one who has a verbal tic. I have my own verbal tics, and so do you. And I hear people saying like sometimes as frequently as Dylan said right. So what's the big picture? This project took me more than 50 hours of coding to do, to get all the transcripts right, to get all the graphics right, to confirm that my numbers were right, to realize that each of these transcription programs has their own quirks in terms of the way they output their information, the way they transcribe the information, that the website deletes all the word right, that Whisper didn't have diarization, that 11 Labs had some quirks I had to figure out. And then the coding itself, since I'm not a professional software developer, took time for me to get right. But it is possible with these AI tools to do really, really interesting discourse analysis, even if you're not a programmer. I built this with Cursor, with AI coding assistants. If you want the transcripts, just contact me at bruce@howcommunicationworks.com, and I'll send you the transcripts. You could reanalyze them yourself. So what's the key takeaway? Verbal tics are not just quirks, they're functional tools in discourse. With AI, we can begin to analyze discourse at a level of detail and speed that we never could before. And I think this opens up a whole new range of kind of what they call computational social science or AI-assisted discourse analysis that's very exciting. So tell me in the comments, what is your verbal tic, or what's the verbal tic that annoys you the most? And if you like my style of teaching, I'm developing a listening course, and you can learn more about it and download a 10-page PDF listening guide at listeningleap.com. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.